Welcome back. We just started a section where we will introduce ourselves with some of the basic terms for cybersecurity. Now, I know theory is usually the boring part, but there are certain things that we need to know first before we dive into the stuff like working with firewalls, using different tools, installing antiviruses, and all of that. That's why it's good that we first start talking about most basic goals of having cybersecurity. Now, we already mentioned in the first video why we need cybersecurity, but right now let's try to narrow down to specific reasons and explain why each of them is important. First of all, we can say there are three main goals of cybersecurity. Now, different companies implement different cybersecurity plans and strategies, but all of them have these three things in common. First goal of cybersecurity is confidentiality. Now, confidentiality simply means keeping the sensitive data private and accessible to only authorized users. This is important for both privacy and security reasons. We always want to be the only ones who can access our own data. For example, important company data has to only be available to certain employees and to people who need access to it for their work. You would never want your business plans and strategies to go public and to be accessible to anyone wanting to exploit that or to be accessible to your competitors. Because remember, there will always be people who would want to get their hands on the data for their own reasons. Now, this data can be anything from business plans for a company to accessing money for online banks to perhaps accessing private user information on certain websites. Imagine any of that leaking to the open world and for that data to be accessible without any authorization whatsoever. That company would lose credibility fast. That's why preventing access to everyone and giving access to certain people is a good approach to protecting your data. This can be done by encrypting the data, by using password and two-factor authentication to access the data. The more steps to authenticate someone, the better. However, this is not the only important thing for cybersecurity. We also need integrity. Now, integrity is ensuring that even if the data is being transferred between the right endpoints after successful authorization, it must not be altered with in the transmission. We always want to receive the exact and correct data that was sent, and we don't want it being intercepted and read or changed. This is where encryption also comes in play by making the data unreadable, even if it gets intercepted. If, for example, some software is being downloaded, we must make sure it's also the correct one so we don't end up running something malicious. And besides all of this, we also must make sure that anything of importance to us has a well-secured backup. So even if somehow data gets deleted or changed or encrypted by a ransomware, for example, we will still have it in our backup. And the third goal of cybersecurity is availability. This means that even after all of our security strategy implementation, we must make sure that the data is easily accessible to people who must access it, for whatever reason. Sometimes, if you implement too much security measures, things start running slow, which is normal as it has to go through a bunch of security checks. We must make sure that the strategy is implemented securely and correctly, but also that it doesn't decrease the speed too much. Now, for regular people like me and you, whether speed is 10% less or not doesn't really matter much to us, but for big financial companies, speed decreasing can lead to huge financial losses depending on what they do. Nonetheless, these would be three main goals to always have in mind when developing a security strategy, and always ask yourself whether these three measures were met. Okay, in the next video, we're going to talk about blue teams and red teams, which is another cybersecurity term.